Good morning, Richard Calhoun, Creekside Realty. We're here to discuss Silicon Valley real estate marketplace. This is the key summary of the things that we're going to be going over in this meeting. So the first thing we have is DUI. DUI is days on unsold inventory. In my opinion, it's the leading indicator. It's the supply-demand balance, which indicates the direction the market is likely to go in the future. Anything under 40 days is a red hot seller's marketplace. Anything above 80 is an ice cold buyer's marketplace. So you got a couple ice cold buyer marketplace, but the vast majority of Silicon Valley is in a red hot seller's marketplace. Days on marketplace. This is the 75th percentile. This is the long time of the typical seller. You can see all these numbers are very reasonable. They're in the order of under 3 weeks. In fact, they're approaching 2 weeks, which is reasonably quick. 75% of your sellers are selling their property in less than 2 weeks on the marketplace. Then you have the seller's reduction of their asking price. This is the current price at the time the offer is accepted over their original asking price. And the first one, for example, here, South County, Morgan Hill, Gilroy, San Martin is getting 98%. So the seller's taking a 2% price reduction. Then you get all the way up here to Cupertino, where there's a 0.3% above their original asking price. That sometimes happens with corrections. It also happens when listing agents increase the list price to concern about an appraisal coming in. This is the different categories in each one of the micro market areas. Then you have the sale price to list price ratio. This now requires escrow to close. So this is a lagging indicator. So the three things to the left, the first three color codes, you don't need escrow to close. You just need offers to be accepted. So there's basically very little time lag. For the next two, you need escrows to close. So there's about a 5-week delay. Depends on the typical escrow, but they're basically 21 days to 42 days. Around 35 days, 5 weeks is sort of typical. So this is a little bit in the rearview mirror, but you can see the vast majority of the areas are getting very close to their asking price at the time that the offer was accepted. This is the frequency of overbidding. Basically anything under 33% I consider be an ice cold buyer's marketplace. Anything above 50% is a red hot seller's marketplace. You can see a couple areas down here in North Alameda County, Berkeley, Alameda, and Oakland are basically 2/3 of their properties are going over asking price. Cupertino, Redwood City, you're right around 50%. And then there's a fair number of areas that are below 50 but above 33, and then a few areas that are below 33. Then we have the appreciation. I'm using the appreciation since April 1st, 2015 through December 31st, 2015. I'm taking a 9-month period of time. That's my base. And this is the percent appreciation the different areas have had. Now you can see a lot of the areas are right around 150%. Some of the high areas are around 170% and the low areas are around 125%. And finally, you get over to the median asking price for the different areas. When we get into the details, you'll see that we have also the 10 percentile and the 90 percentile. The next slide is a new slide, and this is what I was talking about last week. I think this does pretty well. So the blue line is your inventory. So this is compared to your typical. Your inventory now is a little bit below 80%, somewhere around 77% of the inventory you'd expect it to be. So we have a shortage of inventory, but then you have a bigger shortage of buyers. The buyers are coming in at somewhere around 68%, 65%, because the buyers are a greater rarity than the sellers. That gives you a slightly above typical DUI, but you're only somewhere around 105% of the DUI you'd expect. Silicon Valley is typically in a very hot seller's marketplace. You have a very hot seller's marketplace going on right now with very little volume. There's very few transactions that are going on. It's almost unexplainable how you have these. Typically, if you had very little volume, you'd expect your inventory to go up. So the fact that both inventory and buyers are down is causing the fast speed of the marketplace. Now let's look at the volume of transactions. That to me is the real takeaway. And over here you have the 25-year history, and we're the 25th slowest year, lowest number of offers in the past 25 years. And this is the percent of the previous low. So you're basically somewhere around 82, 85% of the previous record low. So you're selling 15% fewer homes than you did in the previous record low. And for those that say, hey, going back 25 years is irrelevant, and it really is, because the number of transactions transactions happening every year has been on a decline. I've thrown in what's happened compared to the past 10 years. So that becomes pretty relevant. We're the worst in the past 10 years. Now, because you don't have the record lows from year 11 through 25, you're now at like 80% of the record low, so it's a little bit higher number, maybe closer to 75%. And the actual number of transactions are right here. And then I have last year on here. Basically right now, last year at this time, we sold 2,555 transactions, homes. Now we're only selling 1,600. That's a huge reduction. That's only 2/3 of where we were last year. Here we're getting into the individual heat maps. This is days of unsold inventory. So now you can look at the individual numbers, but basically you look at this overall and you can see that the market is surprisingly hot. And that's what I was talking about. We have a lack of inventory, but we also have a lack of buyers. The lack of buyers is greater than the lack of inventory. You have a slightly higher than normal days of unsold inventory, but still a very fast-paced marketplace and still what I would consider to be a seller's marketplace. Here's the time on the marketplace. This is the 75th percentile. I look at this as being the seller that's taking the longest to sell, but still being somewhat reasonable in their effort to sell. And you can see that they're all pretty much under 3 weeks. You can see the San Mateo coast is 75 days. That tends to be one of the slower marketplaces. Saratoga Las Gatos is another typical one that's slow, and it's down here somewhere. It's actually so it's up here at 39 days. So 39 days sounds pretty quick, but compared to most of them being somewhere around 17 days, 39 days is slower than the average, but it's lower than 45, and that's why it's pink in color. Here's your asking price reductions. I started this fairly recently, and I think it's a good benchmark to look at. The reason I added it is you don't have to wait for escrows to close to find out what's happening. It's going to be a little bit of a lagging indicator because the sellers that were on the marketplace and not selling have reduced their price, but you can also now start to see there is a fair amount of red on this map, and red would be the seller's marketplace. And if you look at these price reductions are pretty small, but sellers are reluctant to reduce the price, but buyers are more reluctant to offer low. So sellers are eventually forced to reduce their price in a slow marketplace. So the fact that they're not reducing their price indicates that we have a fairly strong marketplace. This is the magnitude of overbidding. This is actually based on closed transactions. So the lag time is now involved. You can see Oakland, Berkeley, and Alameda are pretty hot areas where they're getting above their asking price. They're the only ones that are significantly above. Cupertino is pretty next in line at 103% and 102%, but compared to 112 and 108%, that's pretty pale. And it's surprising me that Oakland is up there, but I think what you have in Oakland is you have two different ends. You have Oakland Hills and you have the city of Oakland, in the flatlands where the prices are slow. I don't get into that kind of detail to look at sub-micro markets, but I suspect that's what you would find going on here in the frequency of overbidding. How common is overbidding? Again, you can see that in Alameda County, Oakland and Berkeley and Alameda are doing pretty well with basically 2/3 of the sellers getting over their asking price, followed by Cupertino at 60%. Everybody else is around 40%-ish, but still 40% of the sellers are getting more than their asking price. This is the appreciation. This is over the 2015 benchmark that I did. So the red areas are the areas that have had the most appreciation. The blue areas are the areas that had the least appreciation. Over appreciation, what really happens is whatever area is appreciated the most recently is the area that has the overall appreciation rate, because prices go up. So if you have your appreciation in the last time, it's appreciating on a higher value, and therefore you end up being on the top. Here's your sold price, and now I've added in the median in the middle, and then you have the 10 percentile on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, you have the 90 percentile. You know that 80% of the homes are between the two numbers, with the middle being the median, and you can pick whatever micro market area you're interested in. Now we're shifting on that, and before I forget, in the description, I will have indexes. I'm breaking the presentation up into different chapters. So the summary was one chapter, the heat map's another chapter. This is starting the third chapter. So if there's a particular portion of the presentation you like, you can go to the comment section and click on the time link, and it will take you right to the new chapter. Now we're moving, and what we're doing now is we're looking at active inventory, and we're comparing it to the 10-year normal. Purple is our raw data. The red is the hottest marketplace we've ever been in, which would be the least inventory. The gray black line is the typical. That's where you'd expect the market to be. And the blue is the coolest, the worst you'd expect the market to be. Those, the three colors, the red, the black, and the blue, stay the same. The purple's always the data. So what are we saying here? We're saying that we have very little inventory. We've had less inventory, but we're way below the level you'd expect. You'd expect to be up here somewhere around 1,900 homes, and you're down here somewhere around 1,400. There's a fairly significant absence of inventory. Now you're looking at the number of offers accepted. It turns out the story's the same. The least you'd expect is way up here, around 2,200 transactions happening, and you're somewhere down here around 1,650, maybe 1,700 transactions. So a huge shortage of transactions happening in Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley is Santa Clara County, San Mateo County, and Alameda County. Here's your days one sold inventory, the best marketplace down here. You're right here. Notice that this last little, it's hard to see on the purple, but the purple's ticked up. And so we had been right about the typical DUI, but this tick up has now put us below the typical DUI and approaching, halfway between the typical and the coolest DUI. So the market is fast-paced, but it's slower fast-paced than we would expect for this time of the year. Here's days on marketplace for 75th percentile. I'm putting this one first so you can see up here. So even though we're reasonable at only 40 days for the typical seller to be on the long typical seller to be on the marketplace, typically you're about 38 days. So it's taking a little bit longer. Not typically the coolest it's ever been. Typical's way down here around 29 days. The hottest marketplace we've been is down here around 14 days. Being at 40 days is quite a bit slower than 29 days. I'm going to pass this slide pretty quickly. This is median days. It's for completeness. It's the 50 percentile mark. So half the sellers are selling their home in under 12 days. But I think the 75th percentile is more meaningful for the discussion purposes. Here's the largest decreases and what they are. So here's where we are. We're somewhere around 94%. Typical is at 100%. So we're taking a 6% more reduction. But these are the sellers that are taking the biggest reductions, and you have to do that to get it to show up. Normally, I like to look at either the 75th percentile, the third quadrant, or the median, or the first quadrant, depending on what you're looking at. Here, I'd extend it out to the 90 percentile. The 75th percentile right now is at 100%. So when you have a flat line, you can even see the 90 percentile is a flat line a fair amount of time, and that's why I'm using the 90 percentile. Here's the average asking price. So right now, you can see the typical, the average seller is getting somewhere around 98 3/4 of their asking price, but typically they're getting 99.8%. So they're taking a little bit more of a discount than they normally do. This is the median overbid. So this is the typical, and you can see the typical overbid is right at 100%. And here you can see the average is just over 102%. 100% is down here. You can see that Silicon Valley is almost always in an overbid situation, because even the worst year we're at 102%. This purple coming down here, we just went through the lowest period of overbidding that we've ever did, and we just barely got underneath 100%, and now we're at 102%. And that's because, as I said before, although sellers are reluctant to reduce their asking price, buyers are more reluctant to reduce it. Instead of coming in and offering less, they wait for the seller to reduce their asking price, and so then when that offer comes in, it's above the seller's asking price. Here's the frequency of overbidding, again, lower than you'd expect. You'd expect it to be up here somewhere around 67%, and now you're down around 48%. A lot lower in percentage of sellers are getting over their asking price. Here's a freehand best line, and I should calculate that. I just haven't taken the time yet. This is on logarithmic scale. I like this better. I know some people don't, but the reason it is the higher above the blue line it is, the more pressure it is, and it's linear. So the vertical separation here is an upward pressure on price. Here's a downward pressure on price. And you can see that we go through this cycle every year, basically. You can see last year in 2022, we were way above. So there was downward pressure on price, and sure enough, it came down, and it came down rapidly. And now there's upward pressure, and it's coming up. It's hard to tell how much of this is the typical end of the year. You can see there's a lot of the end of the year valleys. It's going to take another couple weeks for the transactions this year to start coming and reflecting, but there's still upward pressure because you're quite a bit below the price you'd expect it to be. Now we're looking at the overbids of the transactions for the given week. Not sure why this isn't showing up. This should be exactly a year ago, March 1st, 2022. Then what we do, the best line we ever had is the red dash line. The worst week we ever had is the blue dashed line. The red up arrow indicates an improving marketplace. If this was bold like the red, it would be a decreasing. When they're both on there, it's a plateau. The current week, which is 12 months ago, you can see in the center here, is right here. So now with the up arrow, you'd expect it to go up. The purple way down here is our current data. I'll step through this now. That's 11 months ago. You can see the increase, and 10 months ago, we're already on the way down. 9 down, down at 8, 7 is down, 6 months ago is down, 5 months ago is down. Now the change is very minor, so I'm in a plateau. You can see the lines are coming up on top of one another essentially. But now we're going to start going down again. Where we go, down, 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 and you can see where the solid lines are. So we're going to spend some time down here now. We'll probably hit a plateau now. And then pretty soon you can see that you're going to have to start climbing up because the purple line's up here. And look, that's 1 week ago. And look, so just go back here to 1 week ago. Look at the jump in that one last week, and the green dotted line is a plus 1 week, and that's just taking from March the 1st through March the 3rd at midnight. And I'm not sure why my dates didn't work out. It's an error. So that's why that was a reference. All these dates are off by 1 week. If it says March the 3rd, 1st, it's actually March the 8th, and that's why it's plus a 1 week. We're not to March the 8th yet. So sorry about the week dates being off. So we've already talked about this at the beginning, but this is a summary of what we've gone over. You can again pick your micro market area here and see what conditions you would face. This is DUI over time, so you can see that the different micro market areas, I don't know what week was the lowest, maybe somewhere right around here, the end of January, but you can see how much the market's improved but as the color of the red intensity increases. Yes, there's fluctuations. Redwood Foster City went from basically pink to white, but Foster Cities is a very small area with about 5 transactions, maybe 10 transactions, really doesn't impact the market very much. Now you're looking at the actual numbers, so you're seeing a breakdown between the different counties, Santa Clara County, then you have San Mateo County and Alameda County and Silicon Valley together. You can see that the inventory has increased in the last 5 weeks, where you're up 3%. So what you're doing now is you're looking back 5 weeks this week, comparing it to looking back 5 weeks last week, and there's 3% more listings on the marketplace. Total, not on, that was new listings. There also happens to be 3% active increase in the active listings, and their increase in the number of buyers is only 1.4. So you've had a slight increase, which is a slowing of the DUI, and that's why the DUI jumped up instead of continuing on the downward trend. Then you jump down to closings. This is where the lag time comes in, and I'm looking back over a 5-week period of time. You can see that the long typical market was on the market for 40 days. The median was only 12 days, so you can see that's why I'm calling that the long normal. The average bid was 2%, 2.2% above. The appreciation over 2015 is 158%, and you can see across the board, the Alameda is actually the lowest at 145. Then you have the price range in the different counties, and you can see Alameda County is the cheapest county. San Mateo County has returned to being quite a bit more expensive than Santa Clara. It was not that many weeks ago, maybe about 4 weeks ago, where Santa Clara County was actually $20,000 more expensive than San Mateo County. And I have pointed the appreciation in the green at the bottom out before, and I'll point it out again. Silicon Valley's gone up about 24.7%, but the highest individual county's gone up 115%. How's that possible? Basically, if you're selling more in Santa Clara County and San Mateo County, or anything in Alameda County above the median for the combined county, and the combined county is 1.3. So anytime you sell, or call it 1.4, anytime you sell a house above 1.4, you're pulling up the appreciation. So like in Santa Clara County, if you sold at 1.4 all day long, you're pulling down the appreciation in Santa Clara County, but you're bringing it up in the Silicon Valley, in the 3-county combined area. And that's why it's so important to look at the micro market data and even a CMA data for a particular property to find out what's going on. We went over this at the beginning of the slide. Again, it's just showing showing the lack of buyers and the lack of transactions. This has the 10-year numbers here, so you can actually compare. So right now we're at 1,601 transactions. We talked about the 2555 from 2022. 2021 was 2778, 2164. So you can see these in the last 10 years, those numbers are all significantly higher than the 1,600 that we are at now. And the other thing I'll share is the 1,600 is likely to decrease as transactions fail. Yes, there is late reportings that will come in that will increase the 1,601, but in general, in week number 1, that number will go up a little bit for week number 2, but wait, by week number 3, it starts coming down and it usually ends up below the first week. This is not comparing an apples and apples because it's looking at February data, which isn't available until March the 8th, but we're already at March the 4th, so we're only 4 more days. 2 days are over the weekends. There isn't much sales activity reported. A lot of activity happens as a result of the weekend, but it's not reported over the weekend. And that's because most of the transactions start happening Tuesday through Friday of the week after the weekend. But you can start looking at some of the differences. 67 days average on the marketplace. You look up there, you have to come all the way back to 2014 before you have a number that's about the same at 72 days. Median days, 21. Yes, in 19 it was exactly the same at 21, and 14 was close to the same at 20. Then you have to get back to 12 before you start having bigger numbers. So even though this sounds like a fast-paced marketplace, which it is, it's not as fast as it typically is. And just for the reference, this particular slide is single-family homes in Santa Clara County only. And that's because I'm trying to give the 20-year history and I don't have Silicon Valley data going back that far. Then you just have the typical home, number of offers accepted per day, only 12.3. I mean, just look at that. You don't have a number anywhere close to that low. The lowest number I'm seeing is right here in 2008 at 25. So we're having half the number of sales this year that we did in our previous worst sale. Now, that's not a complete apples and apples comparison because by the time March 8th comes around, I expect this 12.3 to be higher, but it's not going to make it up to 25. And then the same thing down here with closings. You can see that 98% of the asking price, you have to come back quite a ways to start getting that number. Maybe have to come back to 2009 to get down to that level. So it gives you a quick recap. This is comparing apples and apples, but it's January data, so now it's in the rearview mirror. It's back as February the 5th, so I'm not going to go over it. Now what we're doing is we're going into a new chapter in the video, and we're going to compare the 3 counties. This is Santa Clara County, the gray is Alameda County, and the orange is San Mateo County. This is simply the number of inventory. So you can see that these numbers that we're at now is quite a bit lower than where we ever are. You can see the huge annual cycle, but now what we're doing is we're comparing the 3 counties versus looking at the historical. Here's the offers accepted. Again, Santa Clara County and Alameda County are very similar, and you can see historically they're very similar. They're all doing the same pattern, but we're on the low side of where you'd expect it to be. Here's days of unsold inventory, and here at the very end, you can sort of see the tick up in San Mateo County, Alameda County did a tick up, and San Mateo County did a tick up. So all 3 counties saw a slowdown, an increase in the DUI in the last week. Here's the 75th percentile days on the marketplace. So you can see the differential isn't that much. Santa Clara is doing the quickest at about 21, 22 days. The slowest is San Mateo County at 30 days. Here's the median. I'll go over that real quick. And here's the magnitude of list price reductions. You can see that Santa Clara County is the closest to 100%. Alameda County is very close. San Mateo County is having the biggest decrease sellers, and that's less than 2% decrease. Here's average overbid. You can see Alameda County is doing quite a bit better at 104%. Santa Clara County is next at about 101%, and San Mateo County comes in third at just about 100% even. The frequency of overbidding, Alameda County again is the top at about 50%, above 50%. That's almost 55%, followed by Santa Clara somewhere around 43%, and then finally San Mateo County at 40%. Here is the log scale pricing. I drew in the horizontal line so you can start seeing that in Alameda County, you're back to the prices you were basically at the very tail end of 2020, beginning part of 2021. Santa Clara County is more like somewhere in February, March of 2021. Very hard to tell at that time of the year because look at how quickly the price went up. If you went back to 2020, you'd be estimating on the low side, and San Mateo County is holding the best because it's almost just a little bit below where they were in 2021. Here is it on regular graph paper for those that prefer, and this is the appreciation. You can see the three counties are doing very similar. You can see San Mateo County was doing the worst just a few weeks ago. That's where Santa Clara County actually outperformed on pricing, was the most expensive county in the whole Bay Area, and you can see how rapidly San Mateo County has gone up. One of the things I've noticed, and just anecdotally, is San Mateo County takes a bigger hit for the end of the year holidays than the other counties. So we've been talking about week number 9 in Silicon Valley, and then we're going to go on to the greater Bay Area. Silicon Valley was in slides 4 through 61, and then we're going to be going on to the greater Bay Area. First, what we're going to do is take time for any questions. The green is what I call my root URL. If you add in 2023, you get to the live presentation Saturday morning at 9 a.m. If you add in H for handout, the year, month, date code, so 2023-03-04, you get the handout. It is up. I actually got it up real early this morning. There is one correction I caught after I posted that. It was real minor. It was from memory, it was Cupertino. It was on the heat map. It was showing up as white when it should have been red. It is corrected in the video, not in the handout. And then for a specific episode, you type in the year, green URL and the rate, year, month, date code. Looking for any questions and not seeing an unmuted mic, I will continue. So now we're looking at the greater Bay Area, which includes 13 counties. It's broken into 3 regions. Silicon Valley is what we've been talking about. We add in San Francisco Marin region. We add in the North Bay region. We have in the Bay Area 9 counties. That's what the media normally talks about, this line right here. And then we add in the Central Valley, which is San Joaquin and Sacramento, and then the Central Coast, Santa Cruz and Monterey. You can look at the same metrics that you like, and I went looking for this appreciation. I couldn't find where it was 0, and now I'm gonna write down 64 and go find it. So hopefully I'll get that corrected next week. I actually spent a few minutes trying to find it this week and couldn't find where it wasn't showing. You can see the median price in the different areas. These are the most expensive counties highlighted in the yellow, and as I was saying, that Santa Clara County was actually the most expensive for a little bit. Right now it's the 3rd most expensive. San Mateo is more expensive, and so is Marin. San Francisco is less expensive than Santa Clara County. It's not comparing the same house, it's comparing the median price. So the median price in San Francisco with a lot of row housing is under 1.4 million, where in Santa Clara County with less row housing and more single family homes on bigger lots is 1.5 million. But you can look at whatever metric you're in, but across the board we're pretty good in all the areas. Median days on the market, the 75th percentile. Some of these numbers in the North Bay are getting long at approaching 80 days. So that's going to be a long. Central Valley 80 days, and you can see if you look at just the median, those numbers look pretty respectable, and that's why I introduced the concept of the 75th percentile on days on market. Price reductions, you can see a little bit steeper in different areas, but it gives you an overview. Here's plotting out the inventory. You can see that Santa Clara County in the purple had quite a bit less inventory. Now they're very close together, which is something that hasn't happened before, and clearly even Santa Clara County is down, but the Central Valley and the North Bay County is way down, because this is where your inventory is now. It's somewhere around 1,500, and typically right after the first of the year, you're north of 4,000. So they only have 1/3 the inventory they typically have in those 2 counties, and you can just really see it. The inventory just disappeared after the market started to cool and just is not there. And you can even see the decrease in the inventory on the Central Coast and San Francisco and Marin. Here's the number of offers accepted. The drop off isn't as much, it's low. You can see the 3 counties, the 3 regions are grouped fairly close together, and these 2 are down just because they're smaller counties. Here's days unsold inventory, same concept. You can see that you're a little bit on the low side, frankly, from what I go back and look at it, and so that would tend to indicate a hotter marketplace than normal. These numbers here seem to be all low, But again, the real story is that lack of transactions that was very noticeable. Time on the marketplace is up a little bit. If you look back, we're way up over the last 2 years. Here's the median days on marketplace, which I don't think is very meaningful. This is the biggest price reductions, what they're at. You can see they're all close together. Historically, Santa Cruz has been one of the slowest areas, or areas with the biggest decreases. It's right there in the mix now. It's currently Santa Clara County, Silicon Valley, I'm not looking at individual counties, is doing the best with the least reduction. But even that, is about 94%. So in Silicon Valley, the sellers that are taking a price reduction, the 90%, the ones that are taking the most, are taking about a 6% price reduction. The average price reduction is clearly a lot less. You're somewhere around 98.75, and you can start seeing that Silicon Valley is doing the best, followed by San Francisco and Marin, and then the three other regions are right on top of one another. This is the magnitude of overbidding. You can see that San Francisco, Marin, and Silicon Valley are doing the best. Then you're followed by North Bay, followed by Central Valley, followed by Santa Cruz. And so you can see that the pecking order is roughly the same as it typically is. Sort of the exception, if you want to say, is Silicon Valley is slightly outperforming San Francisco Marin, and that's where it's been recently. But historically, San Francisco Marin is typically above Silicon Valley. The change appears to have occurred right here, sort of with the pandemic, and Silicon Valley is sort of being right on top of San Francisco Marin ever since. I don't know if that's a new trend with remote working, but it could be. This is the median overbidding. You can see it spends a fair amount of time at 100%, and you're basically at 100% right now. This is the smallest overbidding. The least amount of overbidding you'd expect is down here in Silicon Valley, somewhere around 94%. North Bay, Central Valley and North Bay are doing the best with the least decrease at somewhere just over 94%, so less than 94.5, so about a 5.5% reduction. And that's the one sellers that are taking the most overbidding. So the least overbidding is below the asking price. This is going to be the 90%. This is this overbidding. So this is the ones that are getting the biggest increase. And here, San Francisco Marin and Silicon Valley are in there. So San Francisco Marin is coming in at somewhere around 115%. Silicon Valley is somewhere around 113%. Then you got all the three remaining regions real close at 104 to 105%. These are the sellers that are getting the most. What percent of their asking price they're getting? This is the frequency of overbidding in the 5 different regions. You can see you go from about 47% to a low of about, I think it's right there, somewhere just under 30%. And I think if you went to most areas in the country and you said 30% of your sellers are getting more than their asking price, they go, wow, it's a hot marketplace. We're in a very interesting marketplace in the greater Bay Area where the demand is always higher than the supply, and so it gets crazy frequently. This is total appreciation. San Francisco Marin is doing the least amount of appreciation. Again, the break point turned out to be right about here with the pandemic. The other areas are fairly close. The area that's doing the best is the Central Valley, and again, I think that's because of remote working and commuting. I think it's also communities like Mountain House that are being built that are significantly above the median price for the Central Valley, and since it's being built out rapidly, then those resale homes are pulling up the Central Valley price, even if individual homes are not appreciating in value. With that, I'm through. We've already gone over the route URLs and everything else, so I guess I'm open for any questions. Anyone have any questions for me? Let me check mics. No unmuted mics, so I think that's it. Thanks for joining. See you next week. Bye, everybody.